Chapter 20. Howard Gardner. The following are quotes from his 1983 book, Frames of Mind. Only if we expand and reformulate our view of what counts as human intellect will we be able to devise more appropriate ways of assessing it and more effective ways of educating it. In my view, it is fine to call music or spatial ability a talent, so long as one calls language or logic a talent as well. But I balk at the unwarranted assumption that certain abilities can be arbitrarily singled out as qualifying as intelligence, while others cannot. In a nutshell, many different forms of intelligence are not measured by IQ testing. Books in a similar vein. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's Creativity, Daniel Goleman's Working with Emotional Intelligence, and Jean Piaget's The Language and Thought of the Child. When Harvard psychology professor Howard Gardner wrote Frames of Mind, The Theory of Multiple Intelligences over 20 years ago, the general public largely accepted the idea that intelligence could simply be measured through an IQ or intelligence quotient test. A high IQ meant you were smart and were given certain opportunities in life, and a low IQ meant you were a bit slow, with your opportunities restricted accordingly. Gardner's book popularized the idea that the logical, mathematical, or general intelligence normally measured by IQ tests might not actually be a good measure of a person's potential. IQ testing may have been reasonably effective at predicting how well you did on school subjects, but not great at gauging your ability to compose a symphony, win a political campaign, program a computer, or master a foreign tongue. Gardner replaced the question, "How smart are you?" with a wiser, more inclusive, "How are you smart?" We intuitively know that how well we do in school does not determine our success in life, and everyone knows very brainy people who have not amounted to much. Similarly, we would find it hard to believe that the achievements of figures such as Mozart, Henry Ford, Gandhi, or Churchill were merely the result of high IQ. Frames of Mind, while going against conventional wisdom, actually gives us an appreciation of intelligence close to what we already know, that we each have different ways of being intelligent, and that success comes from refining and utilizing these intelligences across a lifetime. Types of intelligence. Gardner claims that all human beings possess a unique blend of 7 intelligences, through which we engage with the world and seek our fulfillment. These frames of mind include 2 that are typically valued in traditional education, 3 that are usually associated with the arts, and 2 that he calls personal intelligences. Linguistic intelligence. This involves appreciation of language, the ability to learn new languages, and the capability to use language to accomplish certain goals. Those high in this intelligence may be good persuaders or storytellers, and can use humor to their advantage. Writers, poets, journalists, lawyers, and politicians are among those likely to have high linguistic intelligence. Logical mathematical intelligence. This is the capacity to analyze problems, carry out mathematical operations, and approach subjects scientifically. In Gardner's words, it entails the ability to detect patterns, reason deductively, and think logically. Along with linguistic intelligence, it is what IQ tests mainly measure. Logical mathematical intelligence is often associated with scientists, researchers, mathematicians, computer programmers, accountants, and engineers. Musical intelligence. People with musical intelligence actually think in terms of sounds, rhythms, and musical patterns. It encompasses skill in the performance, composition, and appreciation of musical patterns. Typical occupations employing this intelligence include musicians, disc jockeys, singers, composers, and music critics. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence. This involves the ability to control and coordinate complex physical movements, to express ourselves in movement. This can include body language, mime, and acting, as well as the full range of sporting pursuits. Bodily kinesthetic intelligence is expected to be particularly high in sports people, dancers, actors, jugglers, and gymnasts, but also professions where balance and coordination are vital, such as firefighting. Visual spatial intelligence. This is the ability to perceive objects in space accurately, to have an idea of where things should go. Sculptors and architects need a high degree of spatial intelligence, as do navigators, visual artists, interior designers, and engineers. Interpersonal intelligence. Interpersonal intelligence is the capacity to understand other people's objectives, motivations, and desires. It is instrumental in building relationships. Educators, marketing executives, salespeople, counselors, and political figures are examples of individuals with high interpersonal intelligence. Intrapersonal intelligence. This is the ability to understand the self with a heightened awareness of our feelings and motivations. This intelligence helps us to develop an effective working model of ourselves and use our self-understanding to regulate our lives. Writers and philosophers tend to have this intelligence in abundance. Implications for how we learn. Gardner's theory presents a huge challenge to established educational models. Because if we accept the idea that each person combines a unique array of intelligences, we require a carefully tuned educational system to enable their potential to be realized. Gardner admits that psychology cannot directly dictate education policy, and that further study is required to prove the existence of multiple intelligences in the first place. Yet his general inference is that an education system that takes account of the specialness of each child cannot be a bad thing. Final comments. Will we always be measured in terms of IQ, or will Gardner's ideas overthrow current systems of intelligence testing, such as America's famous SAT test for college entry? Most people don't realize that intelligence testing has been with us for over 100 years, with the first attempts at measurement devised by French psychologists Alfred Binet and Theodore Simon in 1905. It is a relatively easy and cheap way to sort large numbers of people according to merit, and has become well established as a result. Yet the idea of multiple intelligences will not go away as long as people feel their true worth has not been recognized. What ultimately matters is not a supposedly objective test of intelligence, but our own beliefs about whether we are capable of something, and our discipline to follow through. Gardner calls this the ability to solve problems within our environment. The people we most admire are smart in certain ways. They have refined their way of thinking and doing to an unusual extent. More than raw intelligence, they have judgment. Perhaps the lesson of Gardner's book, therefore, is that we should stop worrying about how we measure up to some arbitrary standard of brain power, because the really smart people are those who know exactly what they are good at and live their life around that knowledge. There is a big distinction between simply possessing mental, physical, or social abilities and actually deploying them to achieve success. Howard Gardner. Born in 1943, the son of refugees from Nazi Germany, Howard Gardner initially went to Harvard University to study history. After a year at the London School of Economics, he entered Harvard's developmental psychology doctoral program in 1966, and subsequently became part of the research team for Project Zero, a long-term study of human intellectual and creative development. His interest in human cognition was influenced by his tutor, Erik Erikson. Gardner is currently Hobbs Professor of Cognition and Education at Harvard Graduate School of Education, Adjunct Professor of Neurology at Boston University School of Medicine, and co-director of Harvard's Project Zero. He has received many honorary degrees and awards. Other books include The Unschooled Mind, How Children Think and How Schools Should Teach, 1991. Multiple Intelligences, The Theory and Practice, 1993. The Disciplined Mind, Beyond Facts and Standardized Tests, 1999. And Changing Minds, The Art and Science of Changing Our Own and Other People's Minds, 2004. Chapter 21. Daniel Gilbert. The following are quotes from his 2006 book, Stumbling on Happiness. Before we can decide whether to accept people's claims about their happiness, we must first decide whether people can, in principle, be mistaken about what they feel. We can be wrong about all sorts of things: the price of soybeans, the lifespan of dust mites, the history of flannel. But can we be wrong about our own emotional experience? In a nutshell, due to the way the brain works, our predictions of how we will feel in the future are not always accurate, and that includes what will make us happy. Books in a similar vein: Barry Schwartz's The Paradox of Choice and Martin Seligman's Authentic Happiness. As a boy, Daniel Gilbert loved poring over a book of optical illusions, such as the Nacre Cube and the famous Vase Faces picture. What amazed him was how easy it was for the eyes and the brain to be fooled. When, many years later, he became a psychologist, he was interested in the regular mistakes and exercises of filling in that our brain makes in order to provide us with a quick picture of reality. Just as we could make predictable mistakes with our eyesight, he found, we could also with our foresight. That is, we spend most of our time doing things that we hope will make us happy in the future, but our understanding of that future and how we will feel when we get there is far from reliable. Though people have been puzzling over the question of foresight for thousands of years, Gilbert claims that Stumbling on Happiness is the first book to bring together ideas from psychology, neuroscience, philosophy, and behavioral economics to provide an answer. This is quite a complex area of psychology in which the author is preeminent, yet he spins the material into a fascinating and often fun read. With a style reminiscent of Bill Bryson, there are at least 1 or 2 chuckles per page. Anticipation Machines. Gilbert notes that most psychology books have somewhere in them the phrase, "Human beings are the only animals that..." In his case, he fills in the sentence by saying that we are the only animals that are able to think about the future. Squirrels may seem like they can do this in the way that they put away acorns for the winter, but in fact it is just their brain's recording of a reduction in hours of daylight that prompts them to do this. There is no awareness, only a biological instinct. Humans, however, are not only aware of the future, we are veritable anticipation machines, focused on what is to come almost as much as we are on what is now. How did this happen? Millions of years ago, the first type of humans experienced a massive increase in the size of their brains in a relatively short space of time. But not every part of the new brain had grown. Most of the growth was in the frontal lobe region, above the eyes, which partly accounts for why our ancestors had foreheads that dramatically sloped back, while ours are almost vertical. We needed the room for all those millions of new brain cells. For a long time it was thought that the frontal lobe had no particular function, but observation of patients with frontal lobe damage revealed problems with planning, and also, strangely, a reduction in feelings of anxiety. What was the link between the two? Both planning and anxiety are related to thinking about the future. Frontal lobe damage leaves people living in a permanent present, and as a result they don't bother to make plans, so they can't be anxious about them. The huge growth in the human frontal lobe thus gave humans a distinct survival advantage, the ability to imagine different futures, choose between them, and thereby control our environment. We can make predictions about what will make us happy in the future. Flawed forecasting. It is possible for the brain to cram in all of a person's experiences, memories, and knowledge, Gilbert says, because we do not remember everything in its entirety, but instead preserve a few threads of each experience. We recall only these, and the brain fills in the rest to make the memory seem complete. The brain also creates ingenious shortcuts when it comes to perception. German philosopher Immanuel Kant suggested that perceptions are like portraits, which tell us as much about the hand of the artist, the perceiver, as they do about the subject. The brain creates an interpretation of reality, but it is so good that we do not grasp that it is only an interpretation. In the same way that our memories and our perceptions can be faulty, when it comes to imagining the future, the details that we imagine happening frequently do not give us the whole picture. It is not so much the things we do imagine happening that are incorrect, but more that we leave out things that do happen. As many psychological experiments have shown, the human mind is not well structured to note absences of things. But our brain does such a brilliant conjuring trick in making us believe that our interpretations are fact that we accept what it gives us without question. Do we really know what makes us happy? Gilbert's chief point about happiness is that it is subjective. He tells of co-joined twins, Lori and Reba, who had been joined at the head since birth and share a blood supply and part of their brain tissue. Despite this, they go about their lives and have said to anyone who asks that they are very happy. Most people hearing this will say that these twins don't know what happiness is, a response that presumes happiness can only come from being a single person. In the same way, people overestimate how bad they would feel if they became blind. But the blind still go on living and doing most of the things the sighted do, and they can be as happy and satisfied as anyone. What makes us happy colors all our perceptions of what happiness is, but even our own perceptions of what happiness is will change at different times in our lives. Lovers can never see that how they feel about each other may be different in 10 years' time, and mothers can never imagine going back to work when they are in love with their newborn. There is a neurological reason for these mistakes in perception. When we imagine things in the future, we use the same sensory parts of the brain that we use to experience real things in the present. We are generally not rational about future events, carefully weighing up the pros and cons, but run them through our mind to see what emotional reaction we get. What we imagine happening is defined by what we are feeling now. How do we know what will make us happy in 20 years' time? In short, the human brain is set up to imagine the future quite well, but not perfectly, and this accounts for the gulfs we often experience between what we thought would make us happy and what actually does. This means that we can spend all our lives making money, then decide it wasn't worth it, but also that we can be pleasantly surprised when people, situations, or events that we were certain would make us miserable turn out not to be so. Final comments. Gilbert spends virtually the whole book identifying the problems we have in accurately predicting our future emotional states. But does he provide a solution that could make happiness more reliable? His slightly anticlimactic answer is that the best way to find out how we will feel about a particular future course of action, a certain career, a move to a particular city, having children, is to ask people who have already done it how they felt. As we are creatures of control with a strong belief in our uniqueness, we are naturally averse to relying on the experience of others. However, such a strategy, while not particularly exciting, is the best available to deliver us life satisfaction and well-being, whereas the happiness from relying purely on ourselves is only ever to be stumbled on. Daniel Gilbert. Daniel Gilbert is Harvard College Professor of Psychology at Harvard University and is also the director of the Hedonic Psychology Laboratory at Harvard. He has written numerous influential articles in the social psychology field and is the editor of The Handbook of Social Psychology. Chapter 22. Malcolm Gladwell. The following are quotes from his 2005 book, Blink. They didn't weigh every conceivable strand of evidence. They considered only what could be gathered in a glance. Their thinking was what the cognitive psychologist Gerd Gigerenzer likes to call fast and frugal. They simply took a look at the statues, and some part of their brain did a series of instant calculations. And before any kind of conscious thought took place, they felt something, just like the sudden prickling of sweat on the palms of the gamblers. Did they know why they knew? Not at all, but they knew. There can be as much value in the blink of an eye as in months of rational analysis. In a nutshell, assessments we make in the blink of an eye can be as good as those we make after much deliberation. Books in a similar vein. Gavin de Becker's The Gift of Fear, and Robert Cialdini's Influence. Malcolm Gladwell has become a celebrity in the book world. A writer for the New Yorker magazine since 1996, he came to the public's attention with The Tipping Point, which considered how small ideas or trends reach a critical mass, pushing themselves into the mainstream. Blink, The Power of Thinking Without Thinking, Gladwell's follow-up bestseller, is a more purely psychological work, leaning on the research of Timothy Wilson, a professor at the University of Virginia who has written about the adaptive unconscious, that part of our mind that can lead us to good decisions, even though we don't know how we make them. And Gary Klein, a cognitive psychologist who is an expert on how people arrive at decisions under pressure. Gladwell's talent is for weaving together scientific research findings from fields as diverse as sociology, psychology, criminology, and marketing, with an anecdotal style to create new ways of looking at things for the popular reader. And Blink is an attempt to bring to the public eye an emerging area of psychology, rapid cognition, that has so far received little popular attention. First impressions and snap judgments. The ability to come to lightning-quick conclusions, Gladwell notes, evolved for the sake of survival. In life-threatening situations, humans needed to be able to make accurate snap judgments based on the available information. Much of our functioning occurs without us having to think consciously, and we move back and forth between conscious and unconscious modes of thought. We work with, in effect, two brains, the one that has to deliberate over things, analyze and categorize, and the one that sizes matters up first and asks questions later. Often, the snap judgments we make about someone are as accurate as if we had observed them for much longer periods. The psychologist Nalini Ambati, for instance, did a study that found that the assessment college students gave of a professor's effectiveness after watching a 2-second film clip of them was the same as the assessment given by students who had sat in their class for a whole semester. As children, we are taught not to trust these first impressions, but to stop and think, look before you leap, and not judge a book by its cover. While there is merit in these approaches, Gladwell points out that it is not always the best strategy to gather as much information as possible before acting. Often, the extra information does not make our judgment any better, yet we continue to put all our trust in rational, conscious deliberation. Thin slicing. Gladwell introduces the concept of thin slicing, which is the ability of our unconscious to find patterns in situations and behavior based on very narrow slices of experience. Even the most complex situations, he says, can be read quickly if we can identify the underlying pattern. Most of one chapter of Blink is devoted to the work of psychologist John Gottman, who, on the basis of many years observing couples in action, is able to predict whether they will stay together or divorce with 90% accuracy after watching them for only a few minutes. Art experts can often assay the authenticity of a work of art very quickly, getting an actual physical feel as they stand before a sculpture or a painting. Something tells them whether it is genuine or fake. Basketballers are said to have a court sense, to be able to read the play of the game in an instant, and great generals have kudoya, meaning power of the glance. Gladwell tells of the fireman who ordered his team out of a burning house just in time. His men were trying to put out a fire in the kitchen, but there was something not quite right about the fire. It was too hot. Only later did it emerge that the main fire was in the basement, hence the greater heat coming up through the floors. A moment after the team left the house, it erupted, and probably would have killed them if they had stayed inside. The fireman could not say why exactly he suddenly decided to withdraw his men. He just knew. By the laws of probability, most decisions made under pressure should be flawed ones. Yet psychologists have found that people routinely make correct judgments most of the time, even with limited information. One of Gladwell's surprising points is that we can actually learn how to make better snap judgments, in the same way that we can learn logical, deliberative thinking. But first we have to accept the idea that thinking long and hard about something does not always deliver us better results, and that the brain actually evolved to make us think on our feet. Looking like a leader. The positive aspect of thin slicing is the ability to make quick and correct judgments, but it also carries the negative aspect of decisions that are hasty and wrong. People of the United States elected Warren Harding to be president, Gladwell suggests, essentially because he was tall, dark, good-looking, and had a deep voice. The Warren Harding effect is when we believe a person has courage, intelligence, and integrity according to their appearance, even if, as in Harding's case, there was not much going on below the surface. He was considered to have been one of America's worst presidents in the short time he was in office. Gladwell organized a study on the height of chief executive officers of large American corporations. He found that as well as the CEOs being predominantly white and male, their average height was just under 6 feet. 58% of CEOs of Fortune 500 companies are over 6 feet tall, compared to only 14.5% of the American population. This suggests that beyond the need for leadership, we require a leader to have a particular appearance. The taller people are, the more confidence we tend to have in them, whether that is justified or not. Tragic first impressions. Wrong first impressions can have more tragic consequences. Gladwell provides a lengthy analysis of the shooting of an innocent man, Amadou Diallo, in the Bronx area of New York. Diallo, an immigrant from Guyana, was standing outside his house getting a breath of fresh air when a car of 4 young, white male undercover police happened to be driving down his street. They wondered what he was doing, leaping to the conclusion he was dealing drugs or acting as the lookout for a robbery. When they called out to him, because he was afraid, he went back inside the house. For the policemen, this only seemed to confirm his guilt. They ran in after him, shooting, and Diallo died on the spot from bullet wounds. Gladwell does not believe that the police were particularly racist, but he quotes the psychologist Keith Payne. When we make a split-second decision, we are really vulnerable to being guided by our stereotypes and prejudices, even ones we may not necessarily endorse or believe. When we are under pressure to make an instant judgment, we cannot consciously cancel out our implicit associations or prejudices because our first impression is coming from below the level of our consciousness. Older, more experienced police may be wiser in similar situations because their decisions are based more on past experience of what is likely to happen next, rather than appearances. Or they may have an excellent ability to read the micro-expressions on people's faces, which may last for a fraction of a second, yet reveal much about their motivation. Too much information. Cook County Hospital in Chicago, the hospital that television show ER is based on, found that a lot of its resources were being spent on hospital beds for people who might just have a heart attack. There was no standard way of making a judgment about how at risk a person was, so the hospital had to err on the side of caution. To save money, it decided to try out a quick way of assessing people at risk from cardiac arrest called the Goldman algorithm. No other hospital had been willing to try this because they did not believe that a condition so serious could be so quickly diagnosed one way or the other. Doctors were used to getting as much information as possible about a patient's history before making a judgment. But the algorithm worked superbly, freeing up doctors' time and the hospital's money. In the medical field, it is commonly assumed that the more information practitioners have, the better their decisions. However, this is frequently not so. More information can confuse the issue, leading to a wide variety of methods of treating the same condition. It has been demonstrated that the more information a doctor takes in about a patient, the more convinced they become of the validity of their diagnosis. But the rate of correctness of the diagnosis does not increase with the amount of information they obtain. The lesson? We feel we need a lot of information to be confident in our judgments, but often that extra information, while giving us the illusion of certainty, makes us more prone to mistakes. Final comments. This is only a glimpse of the contents of Blink. There are many fascinating cases, anecdotes, and intellectual detours, from Tom Hanks's star appeal to speed dating, to military strategy, to fake Greek statues, to how orchestras handle auditioning, that illustrate Gladwell's thesis of the power of first impressions. It has been suggested that Gladwell's books are essentially an unsatisfying cobbling together of columns he has written for The New Yorker. But his writing style, leaping from one idea and example to another, is more accurately the result of a fascination with ideas about human motivation and action, whatever their source. While the shortish Blink makes a perfect companion for a plane trip, the fact that it is so easy to read should not lessen its achievement, bringing a complex area of psychology to the attention of the public, and possibly improving our lives in the process. Malcolm Gladwell. Born in 1963 in the UK, Malcolm Gladwell is the progeny of an English mathematics professor father and a Jamaican psychotherapist mother. Growing up in Ontario, he attended the University of Toronto, where he graduated in 1984 with a degree in history. For almost a decade, Gladwell worked at the Washington Post, first as a science writer and then as its New York City bureau chief. Since 1996, he has been with The New Yorker, writing regular feature articles. Time magazine named him one of its 100 most influential people. His previous book, The Tipping Point: How Little Things Can Make a Big Difference, was published in 2000. To date, Blink has sold around 1.5 million copies and been translated into 25 languages. It has also spawned a couple of parody titles, including Blank: The Power of Not Actually Thinking at All. It is also likely to be made into a movie. Actor Leonardo DiCaprio has purchased the film rights for $1 million. Chapter 23. Daniel Goleman. The following are quotes from his 1998 book, Working with Emotional Intelligence. Emotional intelligence matters twice as much as technical and analytic skill combined for star performances, and the higher people move up in the company, the more crucial emotional intelligence becomes. People are beginning to realize that success takes more than intellectual excellence or technical prowess, and that we need another sort of skill to survive, and certainly to thrive, in the increasingly turbulent job market of the future. Internal qualities such as resilience, initiative, optimism, and adaptability are taking on new valuation. In a nutshell, in the vast majority of fields, what makes a star performer is the ability to deploy exceptional emotional intelligence. Books in a similar vein: Robert Bolton's People Skills and Howard Gardner's Frames of Mind. Daniel Goleman's 1995 book, Emotional Intelligence, was a surprise hit, selling over 5 million copies worldwide. Inspired by a couple of obscure academic papers by John Mayer and Peter Salovey, linking the emotions with intelligence, Goleman combined journalistic flair — he was a writer for the New York Times — with his academic psychology background, as a Harvard Ph.D., to produce a popular psychology work of unusual impact. Though emotional intelligence attracted the general reader, Goleman was also surprised by the strong response from the business world. Many people contacted him with their stories, usually along the lines of, "I wasn't at the top of my class in college, far from it, but here I am running a large organization." Emotional intelligence, EQ, seemed to explain why they had been successful while other, more intellectually gifted colleagues had not done as well. Most follow-ups to best-selling titles fail to meet expectations, but Working with Emotional Intelligence is as fascinating a read as its predecessor. Dividing the book into 5 parts, Goleman attempts to define 25 emotional competencies that can determine whether we move ahead or lag behind in our career, and provides a rationale for why we should be attempting to create emotionally intelligent organizations. What employers want. Goleman begins by describing how much the rules have changed in the world of work. Job security no longer exists. Once, what sort of job we ended up in depended on how well we did in college or our technical skills. But now academic or technical ability is simply the threshold requirement to gain entry to a career. Beyond this, what makes us a star is our possession of abilities such as resilience, initiative, optimism, adaptability to change, and empathy toward others. Very few employers give as a reason for hiring someone that they are emotionally intelligent, but it will often be the decisive factor. Other terms such as character, personality, maturity, soft skills, and a drive for excellence might be used in its place. Goleman lays out the reason emotional intelligence matters to companies now, and why they want to increase it among their staff. Because in competitive industries, growth from new products is limited. Companies do not compete just on products, but on how well they utilize their people. In a challenging business environment, it is emotional intelligence skills that will take a company further. Goleman reveals research done by 120 companies, in which employers were asked to describe the abilities that made for excellence in their workforce. 67% of these were emotional competencies. That is, 2 out of 3 were generic behavioral skills beyond IQ or expertise requirements. Specifically, employers wanted in their staff listening and communication skills, adaptability to change, and ability to get over setbacks, confidence, motivation, and a wish to develop one's career, ability to work with others and handle disagreements, and wanting to make a contribution or be a leader. Are you emotionally competent? In 1973, Goleman's mentor, David McClelland, published a celebrated paper in American Psychologist, arguing that traditional academic and intelligence testing was not a good predictor of how well a person would actually do in a job. Instead, people should be tested for competencies that were important to the job. This marked the beginning of competency testing, now widely used to select from applicants or create teams, in addition to the conventional consideration of academic skills and experience. Today, McClelland's concept is almost conventional wisdom, but at the time it was groundbreaking. Goleman took McClelland's ideas further, presenting 25 emotional competencies based around the following core 5. 1. Self-awareness. Awareness of our own feelings and the ability to use them as a guide to better decision-making. Knowledge of our own abilities and shortcomings. The sense that we can tackle most things. 2. Self-regulation. Being conscientious and delaying gratification in order to achieve our goals. Ability to recover from emotional distress and manage our emotions. 3. Motivation. Developing an achievement or goal orientation, so frustrations and setbacks are put into perspective, and qualities such as initiative and perseverance are refined. 4. Empathy. Awareness of what others are feeling and thinking, and in turn the ability to influence a wide range of people. And 5. Social skills. Handling close personal relationships well, but also having a sense of social networks and politics. Interacting well with people, and the ability to cooperate to produce results. Emotional intelligence can make the most of whatever technical skills we have, Goleman notes. Scientists want the rest of the world to know what they are doing. Programmers want people to feel that they are service-oriented and not just techies. Most tech companies have well-paid troubleshooters who can liaise with clients to get things done. They are just as smart and often as skilled as the regular technical staff, but they also have the ability to listen, influence, motivate people, and get them collaborating. Emotional intelligence, Goleman points out, is not about being nice or even expressing our feelings. It is learning how to express those feelings in an appropriate way and at appropriate times, and being able to empathize with others and work well with them. IQ explains 25% of job performance, Goleman argues, which leaves a full 75% of other factors. In most fields, a reasonable degree of cognitive ability, or IQ, is assumed. So are basic levels of competence, knowledge, or expertise. Beyond these, it is emotional and social competencies that separate the leaders from the rest. What distinguishes the best? Goleman observes that the more senior we are in an organization, the more soft skills matter for doing the job well. At the top leadership level, technical skills are of no great importance. What matters, in addition to the obvious factors, such as the desire to achieve and the ability to lead teams, are capacity for big-picture thinking, that is, the ability to chart future directions accurately from the mass of current information. Political awareness, or having a picture of how certain people or groups interact and influence one another. Confidence. Psychologist Albert Bandura coined the term self-efficacy to describe a person's belief in their potential and ability to perform, aside from actual ability. This belief alone is an excellent predictor of how well you actually do in your career. And intuition. Studies of both entrepreneurs and top executives discover that intuition is at the heart of their decision-making processes. They need to provide left-brained analyses to convince others of their view, but it is the subconscious analysis that brings them to correct decisions. It is instructive also to look at executive failure, and Working with Emotional Intelligence mentions several studies of executives who were working at a high level, but who were then fired or demoted. According to the well-known Peter Principle, such people rise to the level of their incompetence and go no further. Goleman believes that they are held back by shortcomings in the key emotional intelligence competencies. They are either too rigid, unable or unwilling to make changes or adapt to change, or have poor relationships within the organization, alienating those who work for them. The executive search firm Egon Zehnder found that executives who failed were usually high in both IQ and expertise, but often had a fatal flaw such as arrogance, unwillingness to collaborate, inability to take account of change, or over-reliance on brain power alone. In contrast, the most successful managers stayed calm in crises, took criticism well, could be spontaneous, and were perceived to be strongly concerned for the needs of those they work with. Final comments. Goleman mentions possibly the most important difference between IQ and emotional intelligence. Whereas we are born with a certain level of native intelligence that does not change much after the teenage years, emotional intelligence is largely learnt. Over time, we have the chance to improve our ability to manage our impulses and emotions, to motivate ourselves, and to be more socially aware. The old-fashioned terms for this process are character and maturity. Unlike native intelligence, their development is our responsibility. A fair amount of controversy has swirled around the concept of emotional intelligence. John Mayer and Peter Salovey, the psychologists who originated it, have stated that Goleman's delineation of what constitutes emotional intelligence, including words such as zeal, persistence, maturity, and character, goes far beyond and distorts their original definition. They have also noted their unease with Goleman's thesis that EQ can be a predictor of success in life. Yet Goleman notes the considerable research on emotional competencies, going back 30 years, plus studies done in over 500 organizations. The weight of this research suggests that IQ is secondary to emotional intelligence as a predictor of how well someone will do in a job. There is still plenty of debate about whether emotional intelligence exists at all. Many of its attributes, some argue, are simply facets of personality, while other psychologists maintain that IQ is still the most reliable indicator of likely work success. Yet Goleman's argument has been distorted. Nowhere does he say that IQ does not matter. He says that, all things being equal, intelligence level, expertise, education, people who work well with others, are far-sighted, are empathetic, and are aware of their emotions, will go a lot further in their career. This thesis will make sense to anyone who has begun work and discovered that their ability to get ahead depends little on what they learnt in training school or university. The second two-thirds of Working with Emotional Intelligence simply fill out what was said in the first. But it is fascinating to read Goleman's examples from corporate life. Though the specific references to late 1990s companies will inevitably date the book, it is a blueprint for how an emotionally intelligent organization should operate, and it may change your views on how things should be done where you work. Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman grew up in Stockton, California, and went to Amherst College. His doctorate in psychology from Harvard University was supervised by David McClelland. For 12 years, Goleman wrote a column for the New York Times in the behavioral and brain sciences, and he has also been a senior editor at Psychology Today. He has a Career Achievement Award for journalism from the American Psychological Association. In 1994, he co-founded the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, CASEL, which seeks to promote social, emotional, and academic learning to embrace children's success at school and in life. Goleman is currently co-chairman of the Consortium for Research on Emotional Intelligence in Organizations at Rutgers University. Other books include The Meditative Mind, 1996, Primal Leadership, 2002, with Richard Boyatzis and Annie McKee, and Destructive Emotions, A Scientific Dialogue with the Dalai Lama, 2003. Chapter 24. John M. Gottman. The following are quotes from his 1999 book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. What can make a marriage work is surprisingly simple. Happily married couples aren't smarter, richer, or more psychologically astute than others. But in their day-to-day lives, they have hit upon a dynamic that keeps their negative thoughts and feelings about each other, which all couples have, from overwhelming their positive ones. They have what I call an emotionally intelligent marriage. At the heart of my program is the simple truth that happy marriages are based on a deep friendship. By this I mean a mutual respect for and enjoyment of each other's company. In a nutshell, what makes a marriage or partnership strong is not such a mystery. Psychological research provides answers, if we care to look. Books in a similar vein. Luann Brisendine's The Female Brain, Susan Forward's Emotional Blackmail, and Douglas Stone, Bruce Ratton, and Sheila Heen's Difficult Conversations. When Dr. John Gottman began researching the subject in the early 1970s, there was very little solid scientific data on marriage and the factors that make it work. Marriage counselors depended on conventional wisdom, opinion, intuition, religious beliefs, or the ideas of psychotherapists to give advice to couples, with the result that their assistance was not particularly effective. In 1986, Gottman, a psychology professor at the University of Washington in Seattle, who had previously studied mathematics at MIT, set up his Family Research Lab, colloquially known as the Love Lab. A furnished apartment overlooking a lake, the laboratory was set up to film and record the conversations, arguments, and body language of couples living together. Surprisingly, the project was the first to scientifically observe real married couples in action. By the time Gottman published The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, written with Nan Silver, his team had observed more than 650 couples over a 14-year period. Most of those who came to his marriage classes were on the brink of divorce, but after learning his principles, their relapse rate back to marital misery was less than half the average for marriage counseling. There are hundreds of titles on improving relationships, but Gottman's book has the edge because its advice is founded on actual data, rather than well-meaning generalities. As a consequence, many of its answers are counterintuitive. And Gottman delights in busting a few myths about what makes for a happy and stable romantic partnership. The biggest myth. Attendees to Gottman's workshops are always relieved to hear that even the happiest and most stable couples have their fights. What makes a good marriage is not simply chemistry, but how the partners handle conflict. Under the heading, Why Most Marriage Therapy Fails, Gottman reveals the biggest myth of professional counseling, that communication between partners, is the key to a happy, lasting marriage. Counselors tell you that your problems relate to poor communication, and that calmly and lovingly listening to your partner's point of view will transform your marriage. In place of screaming matches, repeating back and validating what your partner is saying, and then calmly stating what you want, will create breakthroughs in understanding. This idea originated with psychologist Carl Rogers, who taught that non-judgmental listening and acceptance of another person's feelings create rapport. Applied to the marriage relationship, however, Gottman says that this approach definitely does not work. Most couples who use it become distressed, and of those who do seem to benefit, most relapse into their old conflicts within a year. However well each partner is made to air their grievances, it was still a case of one person trashing the other, and very few people, maybe the Dalai Lama, Gottman suggests, can remain magnanimous in the face of criticism. More myths. Major differences of opinion will destroy a marriage. Gottman reveals a shocking truth about marital conflict. Most marital arguments cannot be resolved. His research found that 69% of conflicts involve perpetual or unresolvable problems. For example, Meg wants to have children, but Donald does not. Walter always wants more sex than Dana does. Chris always flirts at parties, and Susan hates it. John wants to bring the kids up Catholic. Linda wants to raise them Jewish. Couples spend years and huge amounts of energy trying to change each other, but significant disagreements are about values and different ways of seeing the world, things that don't change. Successful couples know this and therefore decide to accept each other, warts and all. Happy marriages are unusually open and honest. The truth is, plenty of good marriages shove a lot of issues under the rug. When many couples have a fight, the man storms off to watch television and the woman rushes off for some retail therapy. A couple of hours later, the argument has blown over and they are pleased to see each other again. Many partnerships remain stable and satisfied without airing deep feelings. Gender differences are a big problem. The fact that men are from Mars and women are from Venus may have an impact on marriage problems, Gottman notes, but it does not actually cause them. Some 70% of couples said that the quality of the friendship with their partner was the determining factor in happiness, not gender or anything else. Predicting divorce. After many years of research, Gottman's astonishing claim is to be able to make 91% accurate predictions of whether a couple will divorce or stay married, after observing them for only 5 minutes. Couples do not end up in the divorce courts because they have arguments, he writes. It is the way they argue that massively increases the chance of them splitting up. In watching endless hours of taped interaction between couples, Gottman identified several signs that they may be on the road to divorce, if not in the next year, then some years hence. These include the following. Harsh startups. Discussions that begin with criticism, sarcasm, or contempt have what Gottman calls a harsh startup. What begins badly, ends badly. Criticism. There is a difference between complaints, which refer to a particular action by your spouse, and personal criticism. Contempt. This includes any form of sneering, eye-rolling, mockery, or name-calling that aims to make the other person feel bad. A worse version of contempt is belligerence, often expressed in the phrase, "What are you going to do about it?" Defensiveness. Trying to make the other person seem like they are the problem, as if you have not made any contribution. Stonewalling. Stonewalling is when one partner tunes out, unable to take regular criticism, contempt, and defensiveness. By disengaging, they are less exposed to being hurt. Gottman notes that in 85% of marriages, it is the man who is the stonewaller. This is because the male cardiovascular system recovers from stress more slowly. A man's response to conflict is likely to be more indignant, with thoughts of getting even or, "I don't have to take this." Women, on the other hand, are better able to soothe themselves down following a stressful situation, which also explains why women nearly always have to raise the issues of conflict in the relationship and men try to avoid them. Flooding. Regular emotional flooding is when either partner is overwhelmed by verbal attacks from the other. When we are attacked, heart rate and blood pressure increase, and hormones are released, including adrenaline. On a physiological level, we experience verbal attacks as a threat to our survival. As Gottman puts it, the response is the same, whether you're facing a saber-toothed tiger or a contemptuous spouse demanding to know why you can never remember to put the toilet seat back down. When frequent flooding occurs, each partner's wish to avoid the experience results in them emotionally disengaging from each other. Failure of repair attempts. Unhappy couples fail to stop a heated argument in its tracks by saying, for instance, "Wait, I need to calm down," or employing an amusing expression to prevent the conflict escalating. Happy couples all have this vital ability. On their own, these signs do not necessarily predict divorce, but if they occur on top of one another over a sustained period, they are very likely to end a relationship. Gottman describes defensiveness, stonewalling, criticism, and contempt as the four horsemen of the apocalypse. The level of negative sentiment slowly starts to overtake the positive, so that the set point of happiness in the relationship declines to a degree that it becomes too painful. The partners emotionally disengage, stop bothering to try to sort things out, and begin leading parallel lives within the same house. This is the time at which affairs are most likely, because one or both of the partners becomes lonely and seeks attention, support, and care elsewhere. An affair, Gottman points out, is usually a symptom of a dying marriage, rather than the cause. What makes a marriage good? Most of Gottman's principles for creating sustainable and happy marriages revolve around one crucial factor: friendship. The partners are able to maintain a mutual respect for each other and enjoyment of each other's company. Friendship kindles romance, but also protects against a relationship getting adversarial. As long as you can retain fondness and admiration for your partner, you can always salvage your relationship. Without it, there is more chance of disgust being expressed in arguments, and disgust is poison to a relationship. According to Gottman, the purpose of marriage is shared meaning. That is, each person supports the other's dreams and hopes. A marriage is going in the wrong direction if one partner has to sacrifice what they want to make the other person happy. Genuine friendships are equal. Related to this central issue of friendship are the following needs. Have familiarity and interest in your spouse's world. Partners in strong relationships have good love maps for the other person. They're in touch with their partner's feelings and wants, and they know basic things like who their friends are. Without such knowledge, a major event such as the birth of a first child is likely to weaken the relationship, not strengthen it. Turn toward your partner. Romance can stay alive even in the most humdrum conversations, Gottman points out. It is when you stop even acknowledging each other, turning away, that the relationship is on its way out. While some couples believe that romantic dinners or holidays can make a marriage happy, in fact, it is the little daily attentions given to the other person, turning toward, that count. Allow yourself to be influenced. Women are naturally open to the influence of their partners, but men find this more difficult. Yet the happier marriages are generally those in which the man listens to his wife and takes account of her views and feelings. Better, long-lasting marriages are those in which the power is shared. Final comments. Once you understand what makes marriage tick at a scientific level, you are in a much better position to improve your relationship and protect it against failure. This, of course, applies to long-term relationships of any kind. Gottman also conducted a 12-year study of gay and lesbian couples and found that their interactions were not that different to those of straight couples. Gays tend to take things a little less personally, use fewer hostile or controlling tactics, and generally employ more affection and humor when they bring up a disagreement. But the basic dynamics of conflict and conflict resolution are the same. It is probable that in 50 years' time, we will look back and be amazed how little knowledge the average person had on physiological and psychological responses to conflict, and on how to manage relationships overall. Paradoxically, hard science has much to teach us about the sort of things, love, romance, and friendship, that make life worth living. John M. Gottman. Gottman is a professor emeritus at the University of Washington, where he was first appointed in 1986. He is the author of over 100 academic articles and many books, including A Couple's Guide to Communication, 1979, What Predicts Divorce, 1993, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, 1996, The Relationship Cure, 2001, and The Mathematics of Marriage, 2003. The Gottman Institute, founded with his wife Julie Schwartz Gottman, provides training to professionals and families. Gottman's Family Research Lab, which received funding from the U.S. National Institute for Mental Health for 15 years, is now part of an independent body, the Relationship Research Institute. Co-author Nan Silver is a contributing editor of Parents Magazine. Chapter 25. Harry Harlow. The following are quotes from his 1958 book, The Nature of Love. The little we know about love does not transcend simple observation, and the little we write about it has been written better by poets and novelists. But of greater concern is the fact that psychologists tend to give progressively less attention to a motivation which pervades our entire lives. Psychologists, at least psychologists who write textbooks, not only show no interest in the origin and development of love or affection, but they seem to be unaware of its very existence. In a nutshell, warm physical bonds in infancy are vital to our becoming healthy adults. Books in a similar vein. Stanley Milgram's Obedience to Authority. Jean Piaget's The Language and Thought of the Child. Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate, and B.F. Skinner's Beyond Freedom and Dignity. In 1958, primate researcher Harry Harlow was elected president of the American Psychological Association. In the same year, he visited Washington, D.C., where the association was having its annual meeting, to deliver a paper on his recent experiments with rhesus monkeys. In the 1950s, American psychology was dominated by the behaviorists, whose endless experiments with lab rats aimed to show how easily the mammalian mind was shaped by its environment. Harlow and his wife Margaret went against the norm by studying monkeys, which they thought gave much better insights into human action. A straight talker, Harlow also refused to use terms like proximity, when what he really meant was love. He told his audience, "Love is a wondrous state, deep, tender, and rewarding. Because of its intimate and personal nature, it is regarded by some as an improper topic for experimental research. But whatever our personal feelings may be, our assigned mission as psychologists is to analyze all facets of human and animal behavior and their component variables. So far as love or affection is concerned, psychologists have failed in this mission." The behavioral doctrine was that human beings were motivated according to their primary drives of hunger, thirst, elimination, pain, and sex. Other motives, including love and affection, were secondary to these. In child-rearing, affection was downplayed in favor of the belief in training, and there was little understanding of what we now know about the importance to babies of physical contact. Harlow's paper, The Nature of Love, turned all this on its head. With his refusal to see love and affection as simply a secondary drive, it became one of the most celebrated scientific papers ever written. Food, water, and love. Harlow chose to work with young rhesus monkeys because they are more mature than human infants and show little difference to human babies in how they nurse, cling, respond to affection, and even see and hear. The way they learn, and even how they experience and express fear and frustration, are also similar. He noticed that, in the absence of contact with their mothers, these lab-raised monkeys became very attached to the cloth pads actually diapers or nappies that covered the hard floors of their cages. When they were periodically removed in order to put new pads down, the baby monkeys had terrible tantrums. This reaction, Harlow noted, was just like the attachment that human babies develop to a certain pillow, blanket, or cuddly toy. Startlingly, his research found that baby monkeys raised in wire mesh cages with no pads had very little chance of survival for more than 5 days. It seemed that soft things to cling to were not merely a matter of comfort, but in the absence of their mothers were a primary factor in the monkeys' survival. The behaviorist view was that babies, monkey or human, loved their mothers for the milk that they provided, since this satisfied a primary need. But what Harlow had seen with the cloth pads made him wonder whether babies might love their mothers not for their milk only, but because they provided warmth and affection. Perhaps love was as basic a need as food and water. Cloth and wire moms. To test the idea further, Harlow and his team built a surrogate mother from wood covered with soft cloth, with a light bulb behind it providing warmth, and made another mother simply out of wire mesh. For 4 newborn monkeys, only the cloth mother provided milk, and the wire mother did not. For 4 other newborns, the opposite was the case. The study showed that even when the wire mother was the one lactating, the monkeys vastly preferred to be with, and have physical contact with, the soft cloth mother. This result overturned the conventional wisdom that babies become conditioned to love their mother because she provides milk, and is therefore their ticket to survival. Clearly, the ability to nurse was not the main factor for the monkeys. What mattered was the bodily contact, or the mother's love. Harlow went so far as to suggest that perhaps the main function of nursing was to ensure frequent physical contact between baby and mother, since the loving bonds seemed so vital for survival. After all, he noted, long after the actual sustenance stops, it is the bond that remains. Love is blind. As real babies flee to and cling to their mothers at any sign of fear or danger, Harlow wondered whether this would still apply to baby monkeys even with a cloth or wire mother. It did, with the monkeys running to the cloth mother irrespective of how much this mother had nursed them. The same happened when the monkeys were placed in an unfamiliar room with new visual stimuli and were given the opportunity to return to the cloth mother. Harlow also found that monkeys that were separated from the surrogate mother for long periods, 5 months, still responded immediately to it if given the chance. The bond, once initially formed, was highly resistant to being forgotten. Even monkeys reared without any mother figure at all, real or surrogate, after a bewildered and frightened day or two in the presence of a cloth mother, would warm to her and forge a relationship. After a while, these monkeys expressed similar behavior to those who had enjoyed a surrogate mother all along. In another variation, some of the surrogate mothers were given a rocking motion and also made to feel warm. Baby monkeys became even more attached to these mothers, clinging to them for up to 18 hours a day. Was it the face of the surrogate mother, with her big painted-on eyes and mouth, that especially kindled the love of the baby monkeys? Harlow's first surrogate-raised monkey only had a mother whose head was a ball of wood with no face, and she bonded with this surrogate over a period of 6 months. When later placed with 2 cloth monkeys that had faces, the monkey actually turned the heads around so that she saw no face at all, just what she was used to in her mother. Again, Harlow's experiment showed that what matters most is the close connection we form with our mothers, irrespective of what they look like and even how indifferently they treat us. Harlow was not joking when he wrote, "Love is blind." He concluded that there was little difference in the quality of mothering provided by a surrogate or a real mother. It was apparent that the baby monkey needed only a very basic mother figure to grow up healthy and happy. The truth emerges. This assessment, however, turned out to be premature. Harlow observed that when his baby monkeys grew up, they had many things wrong with them. Instead of the normal range of responses, they swung between clinging attachment and destructive aggression, often tearing at their body or shredding bits of cloth or paper. Even as adults, they had to cling to soft, furry things and did not seem to know the difference between living and inanimate objects. Though they could be affectionate to other monkeys, few were able to mate as adults, and those who did have offspring were not able to take care of them properly. Clearly, the lack of normal response from their fake mothers and their isolation from other monkeys had made them socially backward. They had no idea what was or wasn't appropriate behavior, no concept of the usual give and take of normal relationships. What the Harlows discovered had actually been observed in the 1940s by Hungarian psychiatrist René Spitz. His well-known study compared babies raised in two institutional settings. The first was a foundling home that was very clean and orderly, but a little clinical. The second was a prison nursery, a rough-and-tumble sort of place, where the children had lots of physical contact. Within a 2-year period, over a third of the kids in the foundling home had died, whereas 5 years later, all the prison nursery children were alive. Of the foundling home babies who did not die, many grew up with problems, with over 20 remaining institutionalized. What made all the difference was that the nursery kids' mothers were allowed to care for them, while the foundling home's children lived under a controlled regimen run by professional nurses. Whether you define death as physical or psychological, it was the lack of physical affection and love that was the cause. Final comments. Critics say that all Harlow did was prove scientifically what was common sense, that babies and young children need to form a close physical and emotional attachment to someone as much as they need oxygen. But the task of proving beyond any doubt what we already know seems to be the role of experimental psychology. And it took Harlow's experiments to change the way children's homes and social service agencies were run. What began as defiance of the prevailing view on child-rearing has now become conventional wisdom. For instance, the suggestion often given to new mothers that they should hold their minutes-old newborn against their bare skin can be traced back to the devastating effects of not having such contact discovered by Harlow. His work with monkeys also elevated what we now believe about the intelligence and capacity for feeling in animals. B.F. Skinner believed that animals had no feelings, but Harlow's monkeys were creatures who thrived on curiosity and learning, and they had deep emotional needs. Yet all this knowledge came at a price, for the great irony of the scientist who helped determine the nature of love was that his labs were often brutal places for the monkeys themselves. As he grew older, Harlow's experiments got more cruel, and with good reason he became a focus of the animal liberation movement. Many of those who helped in these later experiments found the experience devastating. For a more personal account of Harlow, his divorce, the death of his second wife, remarriage, issues with alcohol, and the quality of his parenting, read Deborah Bloom's Love at Goon Park, Harry Harlow and the Science of Affection, 2003. The title comes from a nickname given to Harlow's lab at the University of Wisconsin, whose address was 600 North Park, which could easily be read as Goon Park. Many thought the name fitting, as with his anti-feminist views, famous bluntness, and ruthless reputation as an experimenter, Harlow cut a frightening figure. Harry Harlow. Born Harry Israel in Fairfield, Iowa in 1905, Harlow was an ambitious child whose intelligence gained him a place at Stanford University. He gained a B.A. and Ph.D., and when he was 25 was appointed to a position at the University of Wisconsin. About this time he changed his surname from Israel because, although he was Episcopalian, he was told that anti-Semitism would affect his career. Harlow soon established a primate psychology lab and worked with IQ researcher Louis Terman and also Abraham Maslow. Harlow stayed at the University of Wisconsin for most of his career and was George Carey Comstock Research Professor of Psychology until 1974. He did a stint heading the Human Resources Research Branch with the U.S. Army and lectured at Cornell and Northwestern universities, among others. In 1972, he received a gold medal from the American Psychological Association, and in 1974 moved to Tucson to become an honorary professor at the University of Arizona. His first wife, Clara Mears, worked with him on primate research, but they divorced in 1946. Harlow then married Margaret Kuhn, and the year after her death in 1970, remarried Clara Mears. They had 3 sons and a daughter. Harlow died in 1981.